Today's episode has been brought to you by OfferingTree, which is my favorite all-in-one platform for yoga teachers who want to build websites, schedule classes, share all of their offerings, take online payments, all of the things behind the scenes that yoga teachers do. This is my favorite all-in-one platform to do that. If you are looking for an easy solution to get your business online, head to offeringtree.com/Shannon for a special discount. Today's episode is also brought to you by Pelvic Health Professionals. We are going to chat a little bit in today's episode about pelvic health, and if you want to learn more, check out pelvichealthprofessionals.com. Hello and welcome to the Connected Yoga Teacher Podcast. I'm your host, Shannon Crow. I use she, her pronouns, and last week on the podcast, we learned about social location. And so I want to continue practicing sharing my own social location. I really appreciate it as a podcast listener when I hear things about people that help me kind of put together the audio with some type of a visual and a story in my head. So here's a little bit more about me. I'm a cisgender middle-class woman living in a white, average-size, able body. I'm a citizen of Canada. I own my home, which is on native land known as the Bruce Peninsula in Ontario, Canada. This land was cared for by the Anishinaabe, Odawa, and Mississauga people long before my ancestors arrived here. And I've been sharing random facts about me. I'm in a new location today as I'm recording. I'm actually recording today's episode from my grandparents' farm. I spent a lot of time here in this house and on this land as a kid just outside of Bayfield, Ontario, swimming in the pond, picking raspberries, picking asparagus, and over the last month, I've been helping my dad and the crew here making maple syrup just down the road. And it has been such a gift to spend time with friends and family, and along the way to have memories pop up about both of my grandparents who now have passed away, and especially today. So my grandparents took so many kids into this house over the years. So they had exchange students, people helping them with the syrup or the vegetables, and also foster kids. My grandparents were foster parents for over 25 years. And there's just this overwhelming sense of feeling at home in this house, and especially when my grandparents were here. So there are little memories that pop up while I'm here helping that have really been reminding me of both of them. I'm also a mom of 3, a yoga teacher, podcaster, and founder of Pelvic Health Professionals. And I am so excited that you're here today. This podcast was really created for you, the yoga teacher, so that each and every week you can stay connected to information and inspiration that will keep you going as you do this work, this very important work of sharing yoga. I did a podcast not long ago where I talked about how being wrong is part of learning. That was back in episode 247. I'll make sure to link to it in the show notes. And in that episode, I referred to an article that I wrote back in 2016 on my yoga website all about belly breathing. And at the time, I felt like it was a big deal. Like I was writing this long apology letter to any yoga students who had come to class with me. It was a really hard thing for me to do, to write that, and I got a lot of feedback after I wrote it from teachers and students. So I will link to the original article. It's still up on the web today. I don't know if it will be forever. I kind of cringe when I look at articles from long ago. And I think it's really important for me to share. Also, I got a lot of requests from podcast listeners where I was talking about it here on the podcast back in episode 247 about belly breathing and about what I had learned and how that felt like a big mistake, sort of, or something being wrong was part of my learning. And listeners told me, hey, I want to hear more about that. So I'm here to tell you about it today. If you have ever taught breathing in a yoga class, this episode is for you. It's based on my own experience as a yoga teacher, also my experience as a yoga practitioner, and from what I've learned and then unlearned, and I'm here to share what I know today. Before I get right into today's episode, I also want to tell you about one other really exciting thing that is happening. I'm teaming up with OfferingTree, who is also the sponsor for today's episode. But tomorrow, if you're listening in real time, tomorrow, April the 12th, 2022, I'm leading an online workshop. It's hosted by OfferingTree, and I'm going to be talking all about how you can clarify your yoga offering. I love that OfferingTree puts education on the list of priorities for the yoga teachers that not only use their software, but all yoga teachers can sign up. I love how OfferingTree makes this free, really accessible, and they get different guest experts in to talk about various topics. I am excited that I get to talk about clarifying your yoga offering because I answer these questions a lot in consultation calls or in calls with yoga teachers. And so I'm just excited that we get to dive in. So again, this webinar or this workshop is free for you to attend. It's all online. Go over to offeringtree.com to sign up. And also there are more workshops and webinars that they host. So make sure you get on their newsletter list or check out their offerings. And if you're already using OfferingTree, you actually get access to all of the replays of previous workshops. And if you're thinking, what is OfferingTree? I want to check this out. I want to get my business up online and get people signing up online. Go to offeringtree.com/Shannon, and we have a special discount code for you. Alrighty, let's dive right into this discussion about belly breathing. So I learned all about the benefits of belly breathing in various yoga classes and then teacher trainings. So naturally, I wanted to pass this along as I was teaching. Fast forward a little bit, I started specializing more in yoga for pelvic health. And the pelvic health PTs that I was learning from and working with also talked about belly breathing and how helpful it could be for some people. I even wrote an article in Health Journal promoting belly breathing for pelvic health. So all this to say, I was very invested in belly breathing in my own practice and as a yoga teacher. And in this one workshop that I took, a weekend workshop, I started to question everything I knew. It didn't feel great at the time, like I said. I felt like I had taught something that was wrong, and I felt bad about that, really, as a yoga teacher. I wanted to highlight that in case you're ever at that spot as a yoga teacher. And I think that spot is somewhere we need to get more comfortable with, really. As we learn more, we are going to change the way we teach and the way we share yoga. So it was this one workshop with Trista Zinn, who we've had on the podcast talking about the hypopressive technique. And this one workshop really made me question if belly breathing was actually something that I wanted to teach, and especially made me question if belly breathing was for everyone. My partner Sean and I also have many conversations in our house about various things to do with yoga. We have talked about pranayama, breathing. He's also a yoga teacher and a health and science journalist, and we're very comfortable in questioning things that we've learned. And Sean talked to me about his thoughts on ribcage breath versus belly breathing. So it wasn't a new concept. I think, though, it wasn't one I was really listening to until what really grabbed my attention was that Trista started to connect this with pelvic health. And that's when I felt like there was this light bulb and I wanted to do more research. And the more research I did into this, the worse I felt for teaching the way I was teaching belly breathing. So as much as I felt really unsure to share this, I felt really hesitant to even write the article or tell my yoga students, I want to highlight that today I feel very confident in this. I don't feel that way at all. And that's why I keep talking about it, because it's really surprising to me that I was so hesitant to share, I learned this new thing, try this out, see what you think of it. I was taking it very personally, and I was feeling responsible, which I think is something that we all need to, embrace as yoga teachers, that we are responsible for how we're guiding our students. In the article, I also asked people to challenge and question my thoughts on this topic. And I would love it if you do that as you listen. I'll share at the end of today's episode how you can actually share your feedback about this. because I think that's an important part of learning. If we put our thoughts out there and then we have more discussion. So first of all, what actually happens when we take a breath? I love to ask this to yoga students, yoga teachers. Where does the breath actually begin? Specifically, what happens to the diaphragm, rib cage, lungs, pelvic floor, and the air when we breathe? And I have a really handy chart because I'm a visual learner. I'll share it with you in the show notes. That's over at theconnectedyogateacher.com/267. It's really handy to have the chart nearby, especially if this is new to you or some parts of this are new to you. The chart is really easy to just at quick glance remember, oh, right, what's happening with the diaphragm? What's happening with the pelvic floor? So on an inhale, see what it's like right now to focus on the rib cage first. Find the lateral expansion, so maybe hold your ribs at the sides of your body, or wrap a yoga belt around your ribs and kind of cross it over and feel that expansion out to the sides. Visualize an umbrella opening as your ribs expand on the inhale, and on the exhale, the ribs come back towards center. So on the inhale, expand the ribs laterally out to the side, all around, and then exhale and the ribs come back to center. As you do this breath and you focus on the rib cage, what's really happening also that we don't even need to think about really, but let's go over it. On the inhale, the diaphragm and the pelvic floor naturally move downward. There's no need to do anything. They do this automatically. The lungs also expand due to the movement of the rib cage and the diaphragm. This pulls the air into the respiratory tract and the lungs. And on the exhale, the pelvic floor and the diaphragm move up. Again, there's no need to do anything here. It just happens. It's actually better not to focus on the pelvic floor for many students. I've talked about that in other podcasts. I won't get into it too much, but there's a lot of emphasis sometimes put on the pelvic floor, and we can forget all about it. We can just think about what's happening with the ribs. So on that exhale, as the ribs compress and move back to center, the lungs shrink and the air is forced out of the respiratory tract and the lungs. I think I was confused on this because of maybe some science that I learned somewhere in school where the lungs were represented by balloons. And this kind of set the idea in my head that I was sucking air into my body and filling up my lungs. And I think that can confuse us when in fact I could just focus on my ribs, expand my ribs on that inhale, let them go back to center on the exhale, and that's the only thing I need to think about and do. So I would say try it out for sure. So we know that the pelvic floor and the diaphragm move together. On the inhale, they move down, and on the exhale, they move up. So when we cue belly breathing, what do we mean when we say belly breathing? And again, no shame here. I used to cue this. This is where this article came from. But we can't actually breathe air into our belly. Air goes into the lungs, not the abdomen. The expansion that we might see at the belly happens as the lungs fill and the diaphragm moves down. That presses the organs into the abdominal cavity. And I also have to share that I have this pet peeve in yoga. I'm not pointing fingers or blaming anyone because I've heard it many times. I'm just asking all of us as yoga teachers to question. When we hear teachers say diaphragmatic breathing, let's just question that cue for a moment. So when are we doing diaphragmatic breathing? I think we're all doing this, unless we have been paralyzed in some way and we cannot move our diaphragm. We're all breathing with our diaphragm. And some yoga traditions and teachers, you'll hear them talking about belly breathing or diaphragmatic breathing or correct breathing and some other terms. So again, all breathing uses the diaphragm. So I feel like we're confusing things when we say diaphragmatic breathing. And it might even lead students to trying to do different sorts of things with their body as they breathe. I have noticed over the years of teaching yoga, it is much less confusing when you just focus on the rib cage. So we've touched a little bit on pelvic health and breath. We've touched on how the diaphragm and the pelvic floor move together. And what we do also know is that your breath can really work to improve and or maintain your pelvic health. In my experience, teaching people rib cage breath can make a world of difference. And pelvic health has lots of parts to it. That's why there's a whole membership, Pelvic Health Professionals, dedicated to learning more. You can learn the basics, you can dive deeper, you can ask all the questions over there. But for today, I want to highlight a few more things that I've seen with regards to breathing, specifically belly breathing, and how that can impact our pelvic health. So long ago, I was in a yoga teacher training where there was this demo. There was a teacher lying on their yoga mat at the front of the room, lying on their back on the yoga mat. And we were there as yoga teachers in training to see belly breathing. We were going to watch this teacher do belly breathing. And we were taught in that time that the larger the expansion in that abdomen, in that belly area, the better the breath. And the demo, I have to say now, knowing what I know now, it seems like the demo was to the extreme. And I didn't know that then, Here I was surrounded by 20 plus other yoga teachers learning to breathe in this certain way that actually might have been adding pressure to the pelvic floor. And one might argue, well, everyone was lying on the ground, so gravity wasn't a factor. How much pressure would that really be? And those are great questions. Those are great questions to have. That's true. And we also know pelvic health information tells us now that 50% of people who have been pregnant in their life will experience some degree of pelvic organ prolapse. And many of those people won't even know. So we know that a lot of people walking around in our yoga classes may have some degree of pelvic organ prolapse. And what we should be asking at that point is, how much pressure is being put on the pelvic floor? And is that a problem? So let's say there's a pregnant student in our class and they're standing in a pose, so gravity's working there, and we cue this large, expansive belly breath. And they also have the added pressure of baby amniotic fluid as they stand there. And what we probably don't know is, does this student already have some degree of pelvic organ prolapse or another issue going on with their pelvic floor? Maybe belly breathing to the extreme, this ballooning of the belly, isn't for this particular student. Also, I would question, more isn't always better. And we need to teach the individual in front of us, but we also can start to think, okay, if I am teaching a group class, what is going to be the most helpful here? That is why I really gravitate towards ribcage breath. It's taking the emphasis of that pressure, that downward pressure, off. It's more going out laterally. And coming back to that, more isn't always better. Yes, yoga is helpful, but if you did 12 hours a day of yoga asana, it might be more harmful than helpful. Or yes, we want the pelvic floor to be strong, but we also want it to relax and lengthen. Too much tension in the pelvic floor can lead to incontinence, constipation, low back pain, and other pelvic health conditions. We also know in pelvic health that pressure on that inner core unit is going to go to the weakest place. So for some people, this might be your spine. For other people, it might be your abdomen. Think of a hernia going to the weakest place there. Or for others, it might be the pelvic floor. And pelvic floor PTs, pelvic health PTs, advise against different movements for different people. They will not tell someone who has pelvic organ prolapse, okay, the best thing for you to do is do some type of a movement that will put a lot of pressure on the pelvic floor. They want to make sure that that intra-abdominal pressure can be distributed and isn't all going to go to, let's say, the weakest place if there was a pelvic organ prolapse. And how do we know this? I mean, as yoga teachers, we do not know this for our yoga students. We really need to encourage our yoga students to see a pelvic floor PT, because that's the person that can give them the information and can actually palpate, okay, how is the pressure on the pelvic floor? We talk about this a lot more in pelvic health professionals. If you're like, what is pelvic organ prolapse? What is Shannon talking about? And we have a podcast. So I'll make sure that we link to pelvic health professionals where you can jump in, learn more. It's a paid membership, but we also have a podcast where we talk to Sarah Duvall about pelvic organ prolapse. So I closed out my article by saying that I'm doing the best with what I know now. And I want us all to learn how to do that as yoga teachers, especially when we have something come up where we think, okay, I don't want to ignore the new information that I'm learning. That's important, especially when it bumps up against previous knowledge. So how can we allow that information to come in and then move with grace as we explain to our students and the teachers that we might be teaching, hey, I've learned this new thing, and so this is why I'm teaching this way now. So in my own personal practice, I decided to stop ballooning my belly or really doing that extreme belly breathing. And I also stopped cueing belly breathing and diaphragmatic breathing after learning from Trista Zinn and various other yoga teachers, and after putting this all together, the pelvic health information along with this breathing information. And as I read back on this article, it's 6 years ago now that I wrote it, I can see where I even swung a little too far with some of my statements on there. It's something I'm noticing and working on, not just with regards to belly breathing, but just in general in life. Sometimes I learn something and then I feel like maybe I swing to the outer edges of those thoughts and I rail against something that I previously did. So I can see that in the article. And it's really fascinating to look back. So I try and remind myself that things are nuanced. You know, this might work for someone. This might be the cue that actually does help someone. And I'm going to learn more, hopefully, and have a new perspective down the road. So as long as I continue to listen and learn and grow as a human, I'm on the right track. The very best thing that came out of all of this, the unlearning, the questioning, was in the discussion that came up afterwards. In class with yoga students, from emails that students sent to me after reading the article, and also in the comment section underneath this article. I really love how yoga teachers and yoga students decided to try this out and bring it to their own practice and see, okay, let's try out ribcage breath as opposed to belly breathing that was previously taught. So I encourage you to do that. And also, I would love to hear from you if you have thoughts or comments, questions, if you want to challenge this. I mean it. I'm here to listen, and I'm really here if you're also thinking, oh my gosh, I have taught these things and now I feel bad. So if you'd like to comment or leave me a voicemail, so one, you can leave me a voice message from our website, theconnectedyogateacher.com, or you can post a comment so everyone can read it on the show notes page, theconnectedyogateacher.com/267. Also, before I sign off, I want to tell you that I am going to be in Denver, Colorado for the Yoga Teacher Conf, April 22nd to the 24th. It would be amazing to see you there if you can attend live. If you can't, there is going to be a live stream. I'm teaching yoga for pelvic health, so we will be covering a lot of these things. Go to yogateacherconf.com/live-stream. I'll make sure that we link to that in the show notes. And we also have a coupon code for you, $5 off for a 3-day pass for the virtual pass. Use the coupon code Shannon Crow, all together, crow like the bird. We'll also put that coupon code in the show notes. And next week on the podcast, we are going to be talking about yoga for survivors of sexual assault with Nikki Adams. I am so grateful to Nikki for sharing this important topic, for talking to us about how she has used yoga in her own life and now shares it with others who are survivors. I also want to close by giving a huge thank you to our team, Suzanne, Crunch, and Sinead, for making today's episode possible, and also just sending some extra love. I know that some people on our team are in the world of traveling to different places. Actually, a lot of people on our team are right now, and also supporting family members and friends. And it really makes me so grateful for these people who are on our team. Shout out to all of you for the work that you do in this world and for how you care for people. It's really inspiring. Thank you also to you, dear podcast listener. You are doing amazing work out there as a yoga teacher, and I am super curious to hear, what will you be doing this week to stay connected to yourself, your yoga practice, and to your community so that you can share the yoga that lights you up.